Hey friends. So back home, and I was struck by a thought yesterday after I did my video post on top of Sun Mountain. Then I walk down the mountain, and that's when I do my other best thinking, right when I get to the top. And then as I'm coming down, somehow there's just this, it's like it's a meditation. Walking down that mountain is a meditation. It's amazing. And what hit me, I was thinking about my own creative evolution in a way. And I was thinking about particularly a handful of key collaborators and key collaborations that I've been part of, and how massively formative they've been, and how the character of that work has a real analogy to the world of warfare. And I was thinking, the reason I drew that particular connection is because there's actually a book this is a book that my wife gave me back before we were even dating. She was like, hey, you should check this book out. It's by Steven Pressfield. It's called The War of Art. And it's not really primarily about an analogy between warfare and art, but it's just the title acknowledges that there's this similarity to the battle of warfare inherent in the process of creativity and inherent in the artistic process. And it's, I would say there's part of me that kind of shies away from that analogy, because it's like warfare is something that we're sort of looking at it as a species going, can't we get past this? Like, is this how we want to express ourselves? Like, this is how we're going to solve our problems? Come on, people. And so using that as a kind of imagery for the creative process, not too palatable, maybe. But first of all, the creative process is a battle. It is a battle, and it's not necessarily a battle with other people. It's not necessarily a battle with your collaborators, although it can become that. The creative process will certainly tempt us to experience the process that way. But even when it's not that, even when we're not exteriorizing that conflict, generally, at least in my experience, the process of creation, the process of creating something new, it always involves a reckoning of what can very much feel like a battle within ourselves, just within our own psyche. I remember I came out of, I did 2 years of theater school on collaborative devised creation. And one of the hallmarks of this training is the sort of like rough and tumble, thrown into the mix. There's no established structure for your teams. So in other words, like in a theater, if you go into a theater process, there's usually a very kind of clear delineation of roles among writer, director, actors, producers. There's a whole kind of like system, crew. There's a whole structure to the way that it works. This training kind of prides itself on being just everybody gets together and you do this together. And if you need to establish clear roles, you do, but you don't have to. And oftentimes, that sets up at least the opportunity to kind of vie for positions until you sort of realize as a group, hey, wait a minute, like we're not getting it, we're doing it this way. This is not helpful. But suffice to say, that program, oftentimes, certainly for me, and by no means the only one, this is, you know, this is a kind of well-established experience at this school, is you come through it and you've really been through the mill in terms of learning how to work with other people, how not to work with other people, how other people can be the barrier, and how you can sometimes be the barrier to a piece moving forward, or to a decision process, or to the creative process. I came to the end of that program, and then I finally had the chance to do a piece entirely on my own. And man, every form of friction and frustration that I had experienced throughout the program and externalized onto other people, and felt like this person's the problem, or this group is the problem, or something, you know, where I was able to sort of like feel like the problem with this thing that won't let us go forward is somehow outside myself. Man, making my own piece on my own, where I finally had total control, everything was kind of like under my command. I hit every single form of friction that I had encountered externally, but just I experienced it now internally. I felt it within myself. And it was such a mirror. It was like, oh man, I guess all this time I've had this friction within me, and I've been externalizing it. I've been finding hooks in the world in the form of other human beings to hang this stuff on, so that I could experience my frustration not as a barrier within myself, but actually as an externalized barrier that I could sort of push off against in the external world, and pretend, again, very much self-conscious or subconsciously, pretend like this problem doesn't exist within me, it exists out there. The problem's out there. Coming back and for sort of finding myself in the position of having to just acknowledge, oh man, all of that is in me. You know, there was something almost warlike about that. It was like being in a battle, in a heated, white hot, intense battle within myself. And again, you know, back to the kind of sense that maybe as a species we're looking to move beyond warfare. I'm not trying to invoke that image in order to amplify it, but I think if we extract from the reality of war, not so much the violence that we're inflicting on other people, but rather the transcendence of the individual ego in service of something larger, going into sacrificing ourselves if necessary, or at least being willing to take a risk, a massive life and death risk in service of something that is beyond ourself. That element of war, that element of battle, has a direct correlation to the world of creativity and the world of creation. There's simply no way around it. The risk is that big. The energy is that powerful. And I am convinced that that what is produced can be equally powerful. You know, I'm writing a show about how punk music in East Germany helped to overthrow a communist regime, and it's the story I'm writing is not a true story, but it is. But that fact is true. That element of the story is drawn from history. Creativity, artistic creation, can change the world, not just in a kind of, woo-woo Pollyanna way. It can create. Governments can fall, societies can turn in giant directions because of creativity, because of the creative process. And so I sort of find it inspiring to connect the energy of war, not coming from the sort of glorifying violence place, but from the place of what it takes to step up in that way, and the sort of valor and the heroism and the transcendence of self, transcendence of ego that's involved. That inspires me, and it feels honestly very true. That's my experience. Those creative experiences, those collaborations that I kind of started this post talking about, those are the most formative experiences in my life. That's some of the most powerful. When I look back at how I have evolved, how I've changed, the ways in which I've grown, those experiences are front and center. Almost nothing has had a bigger impact on me, as far as that area of my life anyway. So again, and this is I've had about 24 hours to stew in this thought, because it hit me as I was coming down the mountain yesterday. And I was just feeling such an intense gratitude for it, such a tremendous sense of purpose, and wanting to keep going, wanting to stay in the battle, wanting to stay on the horse, and remind myself that that's what the creative process demands of us. It is not an easy thing. It is not something that's just going to fall into our hand. That will not. I'm not saying that we can't engage in the process from a place of ease and peace, but we need to be willing. If we're not already enlightened masters and we haven't fully transcended our egos, then we should expect the creative process to demand more of us than we might think we want to give. Because until we truly have transcended ourselves, transcended our egos, it is going to demand one step further. It's always going to pull us. It's always going to ask us to take one step further, to be one step more invested, to be one level higher, one notch more awake, 1 ounce more generous, more sensitive, more alive. That's my experience of the creative process. There's no chilling out. There are moments of total release and ecstasy and joy and ease, but those come as a result of a process that is not always that way. The process of transcending ego, like the spiritual practices, it demands nothing less than everything. And if we're willing to give everything, then we can really go. We can roll up our sleeves and get to work. And if we're not willing to give everything, the process will teach us that. So yeah, something about that was just kind of coming up as I came down the mountain yesterday, and just feeling so much gratitude for the opportunities I've had, and for the ongoing opportunities that I continue to have with my amazing collaborators and colleagues. So yeah, that's where I'm at today, folks. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. All the love in the world. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.